You called Richard? Are you trying to destroy my entire career?
Baron will never suspect anything. He trusts too much. That's his greatest weakness.
I'll end it. We can fix this. 15 years, you don't just throw that away? Please, not after everything I did to hide it.
It's too late. You killed this marriage the day you took the key to that apartment in River North.
The CEO who once commanded boardrooms with absolute control, now gripping the counter, knuckles white, composure gone. He thought the worst was finally behind him. He had no idea his own sister had been carrying a secret of her own for 2 long years. And what she's about to reveal will hurt him in a way his wife's betrayal never could. Baron Whitfield was 42 years old. Ask him to sum up his whole life in one line, and he'd give you this. A quiet man who keeps his word is worth more than a loud man who breaks it. He believed that all the way down. 15 years of marriage had taught him patience. 20 years as chief accountant in the Chicago Loop had taught him precision. And on a gray Tuesday in October, both of those lessons were about to get tested. He never saw it coming. That morning felt ordinary, the kind of ordinary you don't think twice about. Not until later. Not until you're combing back through it, looking for the exact second everything cracked. He'd reviewed 3 quarterly statements before 9, caught a $600 gap in a vendor invoice that 2 junior analysts had missed. Ate lunch at his desk. Half listened to a coworker complain about the Bears. He liked his job for the same reason he liked his marriage. Both rewarded patience. Both punished people who looked away too soon. 20 years he'd built on one simple belief. Pay close enough attention and nothing important slips past you. He believed that about ledgers. He believed it just as hard about the woman he married. It started with lunch. Just lunch. He left the office early, ducked into RPM Italian on Randolph, ordered his wife's favorite, spicy rigatoni, no garlic bread, extra Parmesan on the side. The hostess knew him by now. She smiled, asked if it was a special occasion. No occasion, Baron said, just a Tuesday. 15 years married, and he still remembered how she liked her pasta. Hold on to that. Because in less than 10 minutes, a stranger in a lobby is going to hand him a truth that unravels everything he thought he knew about his own marriage. The walk to the Horizon Dynamics building near Wacker Drive took 6 minutes. Baron remembered every one of them. Not because anything dramatic happened on the sidewalk, because they were the last 6 minutes of his life where he still believed he had the whole story. Wind off the river, sharp and clean. A CTA bus hissed its brakes somewhere behind him. A street vendor packed up his cart early, grumbling about the cold. Ordinary sounds, ordinary day. Baron liked small surprises, not grand gestures, never that. Just lunch, dropped off quiet, no fuss. That was how he loved her. Showing up, staying steady, being there. He pushed through the revolving doors, lunch bag warm against his palm, and nodded at the security desk the way he always did. The guard looked up. Broad-shouldered, black, 50s, the kind of man who'd worked that desk long enough to know every regular by name. He broke into an easy grin. "Afternoon," Baron said. "Afternoon yourself," the guard chuckled, glanced toward the elevators. "You just missed your husband if you're headed up to see Mrs. Ozma. Comes through here every day round this time. Regular as church on Sunday." Baron smiled, polite, confused. "I'm sorry, her husband?" "Yes, sir," said it plain, like he was reading off the weather, not a flicker of doubt in his voice. "There he is now, matter of fact." He nodded toward the far elevator. A tall man stepped out, charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something. He caught the guard's eye. gave him a small, familiar nod, the kind two people give each other when they've crossed paths 100 times and don't need words for it. Baron's whole body went still. He didn't gasp, didn't ask who that was. Something old and quiet in him said, "Don't. Don't give away one thing you're feeling." And what he was feeling, standing in a marble lobby with a bag of his wife's favorite pasta going cold in his hand, was his heart simply stopping. He looked down at the bag, back up at the guard, still smiling, still waiting on an answer that hadn't come. I'm a friend of the family." The lie came out smooth, steady, like he'd rehearsed it his whole life without knowing.
"Gerald, just dropping off lunch for Ozma. She mentioned she was slammed today."
"Oh, that's sweet of you." The guard took the bag, no second thought. "She'll appreciate that. Same as last time, I guess. Seems like she's always got somebody bringing her lunch these days. Must be nice, having people spoil you like that." Same as last time. 3 words. That was all it took. Baron's hand stayed out a half-second too long. Empty now. 2 seconds. 3. The whole lobby went quiet around him. The elevator chime. Heels clicking on marble. All of it sinking into a low hum. Not new. Whatever this was, it had a pattern, a routine, a history. He thanked the guard, walked back out into the cold. Somehow made it to his car in the parking structure near Millennium Park without remembering a single step. He sat behind the wheel a long time. Didn't start the engine, just gripped it, knuckles white. Watched his own hands shake for the first time in longer than he could remember. The sky over the loop had gone the color of wet concrete. Heavy, low, waiting on permission. Baron caught his own reflection in the rearview mirror. Barely recognized the stillness in his own eyes. 20 years catching other people's mistakes, and he hadn't caught a single sign of his own marriage coming apart in his hands. 15 years. 15 years believing he knew the shape of his own life. What Baron didn't know, couldn't have known, sitting in that quiet garage with his heart hammering his ribs, was that in the next 48 hours he'd uncover a betrayal 3 years in the hiding. It had a name, a face, and a key that fit a door he never knew existed. If you've ever had that moment, one sentence from a stranger that changes everything, stay with me. Baron's story is only just beginning. That night, the house in Oak Park sat quiet, the way it always did. Porch swing creaking faint in the wind, a sound it had made so long Baron used to joke it got left on by mistake from the Eisenhower administration. Ozma slept sound beside him, untroubled, breathing slow and even, like a woman with nothing on her conscience. Baron lay awake past 1 in the morning, stared at the ceiling, replayed that one word over and over. Husband. Said so plain, so casual, like it was nothing at all. When he was sure she wouldn't stir, he slipped out of bed. Her home office sat at the end of the hall, door always half open, never locked. Why would it need to be? 15 years of trust doesn't ask for locks. He sat at her desk, opened the laptop. The password prompt blinked at him in the dark. Their wedding date. He typed it without thinking. First try. His hand stayed steady, which surprised him. He braced for the shaking from the car. But something in him had already shifted. Heartbreak into something colder, something more deliberate, evidence gathering. The same instinct that made him good at his job. Find the discrepancy, follow the number. Don't stop till the ledger balances. He opened her calendar. Mostly ordinary. Board meetings, quarterly reviews, dinner with the Hendersons. Then, buried 3 years back in a folder he almost scrolled past, something strange. X. Private dinner.
"Do not move." He clicked it. One line written in Ozma's own clipped hand. "Baron won't ask because he trusts me when I say I'm working late." He read it twice, a third time, like rereading it might change the words. It didn't. 3 years, not 3 weeks, not a slip in a weak moment. 3 years of careful, deliberate hiding, written down like a business memo. He closed the laptop gentle, the way you close something you don't want to wake up. Sat in the dark a long while, listening to his own breath. He thought of their first apartment, a cramped one-bedroom in Logan Square, back when Usma was still climbing the ladder at a smaller logistics firm, and money was tight enough they split a rotisserie chicken 3 ways. She used to leave notes on the bathroom mirror in dry erase marker. "Proud of you" on the mornings he had a big presentation. "Come straight home" on the nights she missed him. He hadn't thought of those notes in years. He thought about them now, sitting in the dark of her office, wondering exactly when they stopped, wondering if he'd just failed to notice. Next morning, after Asma left for work, he went to her jewelry drawer. Told himself he didn't know what he was looking for. That wasn't true. He found it tucked under a velvet ring box. A single brass key, unmarked, attached to a worn gem access card, faded so bad he could barely read the logo. Not new. Carried a long time. He drove to River North that afternoon. The key sat on the passenger seat like it might burn through the upholstery. Apartment 214 wasn't hard to find. The key turned smooth in the lock, like it had turned there 100 times before. Not a hideout. That hit him first. A home. Furnished. Lived in. A throw blanket folded over the couch the way Asma always folded blankets, corner to corner. Never tossed. On the counter, a small ceramic bowl, the kind people drop change and grocery lists in. Inside, a folded list in her handwriting, dated barely a week back. Milk, coffee filters, Xavier's blood pressure medication. That ordinariness hit him harder than the photographs would. This wasn't stolen weekends. Somebody had been buying groceries here. On the wall, framed photos. Asma laughing on a beach he recognized as Oak Street. Asma and Xavier at Starved Rock, his arm round her waist, her head tipped back in a laugh he hadn't heard pointed at him in years. In every photo, her wedding ring was missing. Then he saw the necklace. One photo, a summer or 2 back, Asma wearing a delicate gold chain, small sapphire pendant. His stomach dropped. He'd given her that necklace for their 12th anniversary. Stood in a jewelry store on Michigan Avenue, asked the saleswoman 3 times if it was elegant enough. Wanted it perfect. She wore it to dinner that night, told him it was the most beautiful thing anyone ever gave her. And here it sat, photographed round her neck in another man's apartment, like a trophy she didn't even bother taking off. He opened the closet. Her clothes hung beside Xavier's. 2 mugs dried by the sink, small, domestic, told him more than any photo could. This wasn't an affair tucked into stolen afternoons. This was a second marriage, hiding in plain sight 20 minutes from his front door. On the desk, a manila folder. Future plans. Inside, a printed timeline. Dates, milestones. One line near the bottom. Begin trying for children with Xavier once everything is stable. Baron sat down hard on the edge of a bed that wasn't his. He pulled up the banking app, hands finally starting to shake. Searched the joint account. A recurring transfer, labeled family support, going out every month for over 2 years. He'd always figured it went to Asma's elderly aunt in Memphis. It didn't. A woman in Atlanta. Xavier's mother. He sank to the floor, back against the bed frame, phone gripped so tight his knuckles ached. That's when it rang. Keisha. Brother. His sister's voice came strange, careful, like she was picking her way across ice. There's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time. I didn't know if I should, because of Asma. She stopped herself, changed the subject, asked about Thanksgiving plans of all things, voice too bright, too fast. Baron barely heard her, still staring at the necklace glowing on his screen, too full of his own betrayal to catch the weight under his sister's words. A second secret, waiting beneath the first. He photographed everything before he left, every document, every angle of every room. By the time he stepped back onto the street, it was past 3 in the morning. Rain started falling over the Chicago River. Cold, steady, the kind that doesn't ask permission, just comes. Baron thought he had the whole truth that night. He had no idea his own sister had been carrying a piece of it for 2 long years. Or what she'd finally do with it. Baron didn't sleep that night. By morning, the shock had hardened into something steadier, something closer to resolve. There's a reason he didn't scream, didn't throw a single plate, didn't drive back to that apartment and pound on the door. Some people, hurt deep enough, go quiet instead of loud. It isn't weakness, it's the mind protecting itself, slowing everything down so a person can think instead of just react. 20 years he'd spent finding discrepancies in other people's numbers. Now his own life was the ledger that didn't balance. Only one way through it. Calm, methodical, one fact at a time. He called Richard Morrison first thing, before the coffee even finished brewing. Richard, 68, chairman of the board at Horizon Dynamics. Not a man Baron called casually. They'd met maybe a dozen times over the years, mostly at holiday functions, always polite, always brief. This call was neither. I need to speak with you, Baron said. In person, today if you can manage it. It concerns the company, and my wife. A pause on the line. The kind that told Baron this man had spent 40 years in business and already knew exactly how serious this was about to get. Give me an hour, Richard said. He showed up at the house a little before noon. Tall, gray-haired, the kind of presence that fills a doorway without trying. Expensive suit, the kind that doesn't crease. Sharp eyes, missing nothing. Baron laid it all out on the kitchen table. Photographs, lease records, the future plans folder, the transfers to Atlanta, the screenshot in Asma's own hand. Baron won't ask because he trusts me. Richard read every page in silence, his face, already stern by nature, darkened by degrees. When he finally looked up, his voice came low and flat. This isn't just an affair, Baron. This is a conflict of interest. Misuse of marital, maybe company-adjacent funds. This has the shape of fraud. I know, Baron said, quiet. Richard set the folder down, rubbed his jaw the way a man does when he's recalculating something he thought he'd already settled. 4 months ago, I got an anonymous email. Accusations against Asma. Resources funneled toward a certain VP's department. Favoritism in promotions. I had it looked into. Wasn't enough to act on. I filed it under disgruntled employee. He looked at the papers spread across the table. I was wrong to let it go. He asked questions Baron hadn't braced for. Not about Asma's character. About the board's exposure. Had company funds touched that apartment, even indirectly? Had Xavier's promotion track been quietly pushed past better qualified people? Baron didn't have every answer. He had enough. Richard nodded slow, jaw tight, already counting up what came next. Not vengeance, containment. I'll need everything documented and time-stamped by end of day, he said. For the board. For you too, frankly. People like this don't go quiet. You'll want the paper trail airtight before she finds a lawyer who knows how to look for gaps. It's a familiar mistake, isn't it? A vague warning rarely feels urgent until it's standing in your kitchen with proof in hand. Most of us have lived some version of that. A friend's small comment we brushed past. A feeling we explained away because believing it would have cost too much. Richard wasn't a careless man. He was just a man who, like most people, needed the picture undeniable before he let himself see it clear. Asma came home early that afternoon, heels striking the hardwood fast and sharp, the rhythm of a woman who already knew something had gone badly wrong. "You called Richard?" Her voice cracked through the hallway before she even set down her bag. "Are you trying to destroy my career? My entire career, Baron? Over what? A misunderstanding?" Baron didn't raise his voice. Never did. He just unlocked his phone, turned the screen toward her. No explanation, no build-up, just the truth, sitting there in pixels and timestamps. He watched something happen to his wife's face he'd never once seen in 15 years. The practiced composure of a woman who ran boardrooms for a living. It just gave out. Jaw tightened. Color left her cheeks in stages, like a tide pulling back. Her hand found the counter edge and gripped it, knuckles white. Same way his own hands gripped the wheel 2 nights before, in a different room, over the same secret. She didn't ask what she was looking at. She already knew. She sat down slow at the kitchen table, the same table where, 6 hours earlier, her husband laid out this same proof for the chairman of her own company. "I'll end it," she said, voice gone small. "Baron, I'll end things with Xavier. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. 15 years. You don't just throw away 15 years. Baron said nothing. Let the silence sit there, heavy and complete. "Please." She reached for his hand across the table. "You can't do this to me. Not after everything I did to hide it." She stopped. The words hung a beat too long before she heard herself, before her own face caught up with what she'd just said out loud. Her hand froze halfway across the table, fingers curling slightly, like she could pull the sentence back into her mouth. Everything I did to hide it. Not everything that happened, not my mistake. Everything I did to hide it. Present tense, deliberate, ongoing. 3 years of careful concealment confirmed in 5 careless words. Worth sitting with that a second. It tells you something true about deception. Keeping a secret that big, that long, isn't one lie. It's hundreds of small ones, stacked careful on top of each other, rehearsed so many times they start to feel almost natural. But no performance holds forever under enough pressure. The mind gets tired managing 2 stories at once, and somewhere in that exhaustion, the truth finds a crack to slip through. Asma didn't mean to say it. That's exactly why it mattered. Baron looked at his wife. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in a long while. Felt the last soft place in him close over. Quiet. Complete. A door settling shut under its own weight. "It's too late," he said. Calm. Almost gentle. "You killed this marriage the day you took the key to that apartment in River North. Everything since has just been you managing the cover story." Her face crumpled. She reached for him again. He was already standing, already lifting his keys off the hook by the door. The same hook they'd hung on every day for 15 years, holding the keys to a life that didn't exist anymore. She called after him from the kitchen chair, voice breaking apart into something raw and frightened. Nothing like the polished CEO who ran board meetings with absolute command. Baron didn't turn around. He walked past the porch swing, still creaking in the October wind. Got in his car, didn't look back once. Drove without a destination, just drove. Past Millennium Park, along the lake, gray water churning under a gray sky. until the city lights blurred into something he couldn't focus on through the rain on the windshield. Red light near North Avenue. He caught himself thinking, unbidden, of their wedding day. A small ceremony on the south side. Asma in her mother's altered dress, promising for better or worse in a voice that hadn't wavered once. He wondered, watching the light turn green through a windshield streaked with rain, which version of her had meant it, the one in the dress, or the one who wrote, "Baron won't ask because he trusts me," like a line item in a budget. Some people will tell you, walking away calm means you don't feel anything. They're wrong. Calm, in moments like that, is usually the loudest feeling a person has. Just turned inward, where it's safer. Baron wasn't numb. He was holding 15 years of grief steady enough to drive a car. He thought, foolish, that he knew the whole truth now, that the worst sat behind him. He had no idea that 2 days later, his own sister would walk through his front door carrying a small silver flash drive, and that what was on it would hurt him in a way Asma's betrayal never had. Because sometimes the people who say nothing are protecting something far worse than the people who lie outright. Don't go anywhere. What Keisha's about to reveal changes how you see everyone in this story. 2 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Baron stayed at a hotel near Lakeview, not ready to go home, not ready to do much of anything except sit by the window and watch the lake change color with the weather. Second evening, his sister called, asked if she could come by. Same careful, ice-walking tone from before. Except this time, no turning back to small talk about Thanksgiving. Keisha showed up a little after 7, still in her work clothes from the school where she counseled kids all day, helping other people's children carry their burdens. Stood in the hotel doorway holding her purse with both hands, like she needed something to hold on to. In her palm, when she finally opened it, a small silver USB drive. "I need to tell you something," she said, before he'd even closed the door. "And I need you to let me get through it. Because if you stop me, I don't know if I can start again." Baron nodded slow, sat down across from her. "I've known for 2 years." Her voice shook on the last word, then steadied, forced itself steady. "I saw them together, at a fundraiser in Hyde Park, almost exactly 2 years ago. Asma and Xavier, standing too close, talking too easy, the way people talk when they've stopped being careful around each other. I took pictures. I don't even know why. Instinct, maybe. Something in me already knew." She slid the drive across the table. "There's more on there than pictures." Baron plugged it in, hands gone cold and unsteady all at once. Photographs first. Asma and Xavier at the fundraiser, exactly as she described. His hand at the small of her back in a way no business colleague's hand belongs. Then a few videos, brief, grainy, shot from a careful distance. "I wasn't trying to record anything," Keisha said quiet, before he could ask. "I was filming clips for the school's auction page. We always needed footage from those events. I was near the dessert table when I heard them. Low voices by the windows. My phone just happened to still be running. I didn't even realize what I'd caught till I got home and played it back that night." At the bottom of the folder, a single audio file. 47 seconds. Keisha's hand trembled as she reached over and pressed play. Asma's voice came through the laptop speakers, clear, unmistakable. Light, almost amused, in a way that turned Baron's stomach. "Baron will never suspect anything. He trusts too much. That's his greatest weakness." 47 seconds. That's all it took to turn his whole marriage into something he didn't recognize. Not a love that quietly died. A long con that had simply been allowed to run. There's something particular about hearing a sentence like that. Different even from catching someone in the act. Seeing betrayal hurts you. But hearing yourself described as a weakness, hearing your own trust turned into the punchline of someone else's plan, that reaches a different place. Psychologists who study betrayal call this the deepest wound there is. It isn't only about what was done to you, it's discovering that the very thing you gave freely, your faith in another person, got studied, measured, used against you on purpose. That kind of injury doesn't just break a heart. It makes a person wonder if trusting anyone ever again is safe. Something in Baron's chest seized and didn't let go. He stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the screen long after the audio finished. Tears ran down his face. He didn't move to wipe them. Just let them fall, the way rain falls. Without asking permission, without apology. Keisha broke first. Face in her hands, sobbing, shoulders shaking with 2 years of held breath finally let go. "I didn't have the courage to tell you," she said between gasps. "I was scared, Baron. Scared of breaking up what everybody saw as the perfect family. Our family. You know what people said about you two at church? At the cookouts? Look at Baron and Asma, the picture of success. I didn't want to be the one who took that away from you. Didn't want people whispering I destroyed it." Her words landed somewhere deeper than Asma's betrayal ever had. Because Asma's lie was about love. Keisha's silence was about fear. Fear of a community's judgment. Fear of being the one who cracked the image everyone had built around them, brick by careful brick, for 15 years. Maybe it helps to understand why a good person, and Keisha was a good person, the kind who spent her days helping kids carry their hardest feelings, can still choose silence over honesty. It rarely comes from not caring. More often, it comes from caring about too many people at once, and not knowing how to protect one without seeming to betray the rest. When a family spent years getting praised for looking a certain way, telling the truth starts to feel like its own kind of disloyalty. Even when staying quiet is the thing doing the real damage. Fear dressed up as loyalty looks almost exactly like the real thing, right up until the moment it breaks something it was supposed to protect. And in protecting that image, she'd let her own brother walk blind through 2 more years of a marriage that wasn't real. Baron stood up slow. Keisha flinched for a second, like she expected him to walk out the way he'd walked out on Asma. Instead, he crossed the small distance and pulled his sister into his arms. Neither said anything for a long while. Just stood there, 2 grown siblings holding on to each other in a hotel room over Lake Michigan, crying together for the first time since they were kids. Since long before either of them learned what it cost to keep a family's image polished and whole. Later, when the worst of the crying passed, Baron asked the question sitting underneath everything else. Why now? Why not before? Why not after the anniversary dinners and the barbecues where he'd toasted his own marriage in front of people who already knew the truth? Keisha wiped her face with the back of her hand. Because when you called Richard, I knew the image was already gone. I'd spent 2 years protecting something that had already broken. All I was protecting anymore was my own silence. The most honest thing anyone had said to him in 3 years. There's a kind of relief that only comes from finally saying the thing you've been carrying alone. It doesn't undo the years of holding it in. But it does something almost as important. It gives 2 people permission to grieve the same loss together instead of separately, instead of alone. That's often where real healing quietly starts. Not in the moment the truth comes out. In the moment someone else chooses to stay in the room with you after it does. Next morning, Baron drove to the Cook County Courthouse and filed for divorce. Illinois didn't ask him to prove what Asma had done to end the marriage, only that it was beyond repair, which by then was the simplest true thing he'd said in days. But the documents he'd gathered would matter for what came next. Under Illinois law, a spouse who spends shared money supporting an affair can be made to account for it when everything gets divided. With the transfers, the lease, the calendar entry, all time-stamped, there'd be no room for Ozma to argue otherwise. Within the week, the Horizon Dynamics board, armed with everything Baron and Richard compiled, voted to remove Ozma as CEO. Xavier was terminated the same afternoon, his office cleared under the watch of 2 security guards he used to joke with easy in the lobby. Richard handled the public statement himself. Careful, measured, cited leadership changes without naming specifics, protecting the stock price more than anyone's reputation. Exactly the way Baron expected. Privately, before the announcement went out, he called just to say one thing. "You did the right thing. Most people in your position would have stayed quiet for the comfort of it." Richard later learned, almost as a footnote, that the anonymous email 4 months back came from a mid-level analyst in finance, someone who'd noticed irregular expense routing tied to Xavier's team, but didn't have enough evidence or courage to put a name to the complaint. Small, almost unremarkable in the end, except for what it confirmed. Baron hadn't been the only one paying attention. He'd just been the only one with enough at stake to follow it all the way through. Word moved fast through Chicago business circles, faster through their old church community. People who once called Baron and Ozma the picture of a successful black family now traded careful, hushed conversations after Sunday service. The kind of whispers Keisha spent 2 years trying to prevent. Happening anyway. Just delayed. Just rearranged. It's a hard lesson, but a true one. Silence almost never stops a story from coming out. It only decides who gets hurt the most by the time it finally does. Baron felt none of the satisfaction he might have expected. Mostly just tired, hollowed out. Quiet in a way that wasn't peace yet. Wasn't quite grief anymore either. 2 months later, standing in that courthouse hallway with the final decree in hand, Baron thought this was the end of the story. He had no idea that 2 years later, a message from Xavier himself would arrive and force him to reconsider just how far his wife had been willing to go to protect her secret. The truth had already cost him his marriage. What he didn't know yet was how much further it would still reach. Baron sold the house in Oak Park that winter. Didn't linger over the decision the way he thought he might. The porch swing that creaked through 15 years of marriage went with the new owners. Somehow that felt right. Some things belong to a chapter, not to the person who lived through it. He found a smaller condo in Lakeview, close enough to the water he could hear the gulls mornings and watch the lake shift through every shade of gray Chicago had to offer. Started seeing a therapist that January. A black woman with kind eyes and a steady, unhurried way of letting silence do its work in the room. He didn't talk much early on. Mostly just sat. Let himself feel things he'd been too busy gathering evidence to feel. One session in February, she asked him a question that stuck for weeks. Not what he'd lost. What he'd been so afraid of losing that he stopped noticing the marriage slipping away in the first place. He didn't have an answer that day. Thought about it on the drive home. In the shower. Lying awake at 2 in the morning the way he used to, when the only thing keeping him up was suspicion. The answer, when it finally came, surprised him. He'd been afraid of being wrong about something he'd built his whole identity on being right about. 2 years passed that way. Slow. Honest. No rush toward healing, because Baron learned the hard way that rushing toward anything, trust, love, certainty, was how a person ended up blindsided in a marble lobby with a bag of cold pasta in his hand. Then, one ordinary Tuesday evening, a message arrived from Xavier. Baron almost didn't open it. Stared at the name on his screen a long moment, debating. In the end, curiosity won out over avoidance. Long, rambling message. The kind a man writes when he's easing his own conscience more than reaching anyone else. Xavier wrote about regret. about how things fell apart with Ozma not long after the scandal, how the relationship hadn't survived the loss of her position, her money, her polish. Then, almost as an afterthought, buried in a paragraph about nothing in particular, a line that stopped Baron cold all over again. I know Ozma once hired a private investigation firm to follow you for 6 months. I always thought you should know that. Baron read it 3 times. Further down, almost like an explanation nobody asked for, Xavier admitted he'd seen the investigator's invoices once, sitting open on Ozma's laptop back at the River North apartment. Back when he still mistook her thoroughness for devotion instead of control. 6 months, a private investigator, following him to the office, to lunch, wherever a quiet, trusting man went on an ordinary day. All so Ozma could be certain her own husband suspected nothing, while she finalized her plans to leave him on her own terms, at her own convenience. He thought back, couldn't stop himself, to a stretch of months 2 years earlier when he felt strangely watched leaving the gym, when a car he didn't recognize seemed to idle near the house more than once. He'd dismissed it at the time, told himself he was being paranoid. Chicago's a big city full of strangers with nowhere better to park. He hadn't been paranoid. He'd simply been right about the wrong thing. It wasn't just an affair then. Never had been. It was a campaign. Years of careful management, right down to surveilling the one person who never once thought to surveil her. Baron set the phone down on the counter, didn't reply, turned the screen off, sat at his small table by the window and looked out at Lake Michigan a long while, watched the last light fade gray into darker gray. Something settled in him that night. Not peace exactly, something close to it. The last locked door had finally opened, and nothing was left behind it to surprise him anymore. Keisha started coming around more after that. Sunday dinners mostly. Simple things. Baked chicken, her famous greens. The two of them at his small table the way they used to as kids, before either of them understood what it cost to keep a family's image polished and whole. She never apologized again after that first night in the hotel room. Didn't need to. Just kept showing up, week after week, slowly rebuilding the trust fear had once worn thin. It was at a used bookstore in Hyde Park, an unremarkable Saturday, that Baron met Nia, a widowed schoolteacher with a soft laugh and a stack of paperbacks balanced precarious in one arm. He caught 2 of them before they hit the floor. She thanked him, looked him over half a second too long, asked if he had a recommendation for something that wouldn't break her heart. He told her he wasn't sure he was the right person to ask. She laughed at that, really laughed, easy and unguarded. Told him that was probably the most honest answer anyone had ever given her in a bookstore. They didn't rush anything. No grand declarations, no whirlwind. Just coffee every now and then. A walk along the lakefront when the weather allowed it. Slow, steady, the way Baron always knew how to be. One Saturday morning, sitting on his balcony with the lake stretched gray and quiet before him, his phone buzzed. Nia. Something about brunch. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic, just 2 people making easy plans. He smiled at the screen. Not the smile of a man who'd won something. The smile of a man who'd simply, finally, let something go. A few weeks later, he ran into Ozma at a Whole Foods on the north side, both reaching for the same display of produce before either noticed the other. She looked thinner than he remembered, tired in a way polish couldn't quite cover anymore. The powerful CEO who once commanded boardrooms, now standing in a grocery aisle looking unsure of herself for maybe the first time in years. Baron gave her a small, simple nod. No words, no anger left to spend. He turned and walked away, cartwheels squeaking soft against the linoleum. Didn't look back. Ozma stood there a long moment, watching him go, looking very much like a woman who'd finally understood, far too late, exactly what she'd traded away. Baron believed he'd already learned everything this betrayal had to teach him. He hadn't yet realized the most important lesson was waiting for him, quiet, on his own balcony. Baron never stood in front of a mirror and declared himself completely healed. Life doesn't usually hand a person a moment that neat, that final. Healing, he came to learn, was quieter than that. Less a finish line, more a long, steady walk you only notice you've taken once you turn around and see how far back the beginning is. He didn't forgive Ozma, not in any official, spoken-aloud way, but he didn't carry hatred for her either, not anymore. Somewhere along the last 2 years, hatred had just gotten too heavy a thing to keep holding. He found, almost without meaning to, that he no longer had the strength or the wish to pick it back up. He thought about it sometimes, sitting on his balcony in the evenings, the lake turning silver just before the streetlights came on. The truth hurts, he told himself once. The thought arriving simple and clear, like something he'd always known but never quite said out loud. But it set me free. He thought about his sister, too, the years she'd spent silent, not out of cruelty, out of fear. Fear of cracking the polished image other people built around their family, brick by careful brick, at every church potluck, every proud conversation among friends. He understood that fear now, even if it cost him dearly. Understanding it didn't erase the hurt, but it made room for something gentler to grow up alongside it. A 42-year-old black man, betrayed first by the wife who built a second life behind his back, then by the sister who knew and stayed quiet to protect appearances, still had every right to walk away from both of those betrayals with his dignity intact. He didn't need to become the villain of someone else's story to finally become the hero of his own. Keisha showed her repair in small, unglamorous ways. She'd appear at his door on an ordinary Tuesday with takeout neither of them needed. Just sit with him while a basketball game played quiet in the background. Not filling the silence with anything, just making room in it. Once, when he finally told her about the necklace, the one detail he hadn't been able to say out loud till then, she didn't try to fix it or explain it away. She just reached over and held his hand till he was ready to talk about something else. With Nia, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in a long while. Talking, really talking. About things that had nothing to do with grief or evidence or the careful forensic work of unraveling someone else's lies. She told him about her late husband, a Navy man she'd loved fierce and lost too soon. About the church bazaar last spring, where she ruined a recipe card with a spilled cup of coffee and still somehow won second place for her apple pie. She confessed, no trace of shame, that she fell asleep to Hallmark movies most nights and had strong, immovable opinions about which ones were worth a rewatch. He found himself looking forward to finding out which ones. Easy, unhurried. The kind of conversation two people share when neither one's performing for the other. Clear evening, late spring. Baron sat alone on his balcony, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the waves roll restless and gray against the shoreline. The wind carried the smell of the water up to him, mixed with something green and growing from the small herb planter Keisha gave him for his birthday. Basil and mint he kept forgetting to water, and somehow, against all odds, kept surviving anyway. He thought about the lobby, the security guard, the two words that cracked his whole world open, her husband. Felt like a long time ago now. Like something that happened to a different man in a different life. A man who spent 15 years quietly being the foundation everyone else stood on. Never once asking what it might feel like to just stand on his own. He didn't need to be anyone's foundation anymore. Not Ozma's, not even, in the old anxious way, his community's polished idea of what a successful family was supposed to look like. For the first time in 15 years, Baron Whitfield didn't have to be anyone else's foundation. He only had to be himself. And that, he found, sitting quiet with the lake stretched out before him and the last warm light fading slow across the water, was more than enough. Written by a human with AI as companion, it hopes to leave you with a warm feeling that even when wrongly treated or looked down upon, there are still people and good things quietly standing on your side. Production team, story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.